Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions. Today I'm joined by Jim and Richard. Both of these guys are wealth managers. The reason I brought the pair of them in is because we've done a lot of life after exits, and I was quite surprised is that whilst people got stuff going on as they exit, um, there wasn't any clear definition. You know, some of them would say, I've got some property, or I'm doing crypto, or I'm going to go again as a seller, but no one was really fully defined. I think Richard Turnbull spoke about it the most, and obviously there's also people want to respect their privacy, and it's their money and it's their private business. So I just thought today we could elaborate on this from some experts in the field and just give a full view. Whoever you use as a wealth manager, it's always good to know what financial instruments are out there, kind of investments and stuff that you can take. So Jim, Richard, welcome to the show. Do you want to do a little introduction, starting with Richard?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Danny. Well, thanks for having us on the show. I've been at Close Brothers for 16 years. I'm a portfolio manager. I've been in the industry 25. Previously, I was a lawyer for my sins, but I left as soon as I could. I look after people's money and try and make sure that they're well protected for the future. We are very much a bespoke service for our clients.
Cool. One quick question. Can you just turn your volume down on your iPad? It's only because when you're talking, it's breaking up slightly.
Sure. Just done that now. Hopefully that's a bit better.
A bit lower. Sorry, I keep getting crackling sound. So because it'll drive the listeners mad as we're
going Is that
through.
Any better?
Yeah, it's a bit better. If you come back from the mic a little bit and speak.
Yeah. Okay.
That's much better. Yeah. If you go back a little bit, and yeah, it's only because it crackles every time that you speak. Anyway, apologies for that. Jim.
Thanks for having us on the show, Danny. I, like Richard, have been around for some time. I initially trained as an analyst with an investment bank and was working in investment banking and equities for some time. In 2004, I moved to the investment side and have worked at a variety of hedge funds and investment management companies. I've lived in the States for 4 years. And I joined Richard at Close very recently, and we're working together as a team in the high net worth business, managing clients' money, helping them navigate markets and investing.
Excellent. So let's just go into some of the areas. I mean, it was good that when you guys reached out to me through Jim Mann from Thrasio, is your namesake and family member. It was quite interesting because you said you'd listened to a lot of the shows, which you've done the research about Seller Sessions. What did you find that when you listened to these incredible entrepreneurs, where are some of the gaps that they wasn't filling, in terms of having a portfolio?
Well, it's fascinating to hear that so many are interested in crypto and property. And those are, obviously very hot asset classes at the moment. And I think, the first thing that struck us was the spread, really, and diversification. There's a huge opportunity set out there in terms of your investments. And it's really, are people throwing the net far and wide enough? There's nothing wrong with property, there's nothing wrong with crypto, but it should be a portion of your assets, probably not all of it, was the sort of first thing. But lots of interesting chat from everyone. And it was fascinating hearing how the sort of people are getting bowled over by the money landing in the bank, and absolutely that's quite a common phenomenon. And it's really what you do next really was the thing that struck us.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that stands out, because in any space that you work in, there are always going to be people that are going to be promoting courses and webinars and seminars and stuff. And obviously on that side, there's a lot of these property kind of ones that are going about, and even more so is crypto. So I suppose they've got their heads very much so above the parapet, would you say, for Jim?
Yes. Well, one thing I would say is, property and crypto seem to be very popular, particularly with some of the younger members of your audience. And I think, Richard and I have been investing for some time, and, investing in equities and fixed income and alternative assets, and it's an incredibly complicated area. It's not one that has a lot of education materials or courses or easy materials that people can use. And there is a lot of complexity. On top of the complexity of the assets is the complexity of the personal tax situation and any legislation pertaining to investing in pensions, for example, or tax efficient investments. And so when you layer on the complexity of the tax and pensions legislation on top of the complexity of the actual underlying assets, it's all too easy to say, well, sort of understand property, and perhaps I think I understand crypto. And as you say, there's a lot of information that's very current on those assets at the moment. And of course, crypto has been a bit up and down, but property of late has been, very hot. And so it's sometimes easier to think that you're investing in an asset class that's going to continue to rise into perpetuity, and you're more likely to buy something perhaps if it's gone up a lot, because you think it might go up a bit more. And we'd argue that that's something you need to be slightly wary of.
Cool. So what would you say after listening to the show, maybe 6, I think you listened to 5 or 6 of them, where would you have put these people's money? So if they were to come to you, and they're going, okay, I've just had an exit to X, Y, and Z. What should I do with my money? What kind of return should I look? What's my diversification? I know how long is a piece of string, and that's going to depend on some factors. But what would those factors be, and what would you suggest?
If I can pick up on that, I guess the first thing about providing a bespoke service is to ask the client, what do they want the money to do?
Yeah.
What are their plans? Because everyone has, you've sold your business. You might want to go and sit on the beach. You might want to go again in 6 months. You might want to retire forever. You might want to replace your income. Okay,
let's do it like this. So we'll give you something fixed. Let's say one of them exited. They want to go again as an Amazon seller, so they're going to allocate some funds to a new brand, right? So let's say they put away 100K. Just to the side, and then they go, we've got 200K now where we want to use that investment, whether that's all the money is then invested right now or it's over a period of time on performance. What would you do with someone like that who wants to stay in the game as an entrepreneur, but they still want to know that they've got some assets growing over time?
So I guess that neatly divides down the short versus the long term. And the bottom, the simple rule of thumb for our business is the longer your time horizon, the longer you're prepared to put money away, the more risk you can take.
Yeah.
Let's say you're setting aside money for 6 months. You don't really want to be in risky assets. Let's, for instance, that seller who's thinking, right, I want to have a bit of fun. I'm going to come back, have a crack at this, and I'm going to compartmentalize, say that the 100 or 200K as my sort of go again reinvestment money. You probably don't want to be taking risk with that, because I know even with crypto volatility or stock market volatility, the last thing you want to do is think you've got 200,000, then you look at it, you've got 150,000. It's like, oh, right, okay. So it does come down to your time horizon. Now, as a general rule of thumb, if you can take that longer term view, you can cope with that volatility. And so, for us, for clients that can cope with the volatility, we're looking at global multinational companies investing around the world in very strong franchises, companies with pricing power and innovation, and are well set for the future, to give a general theme.
Okay. And what about one of the most common things that we see on the show, which is a good problem to have? They're suddenly having they're paying themselves wages, and then suddenly they exit, and they've got no way to generate replacement income straight away. So they think, oh, we'll buy and rent out properties, etc., because there's no wages coming into the family home without touching the principal. So what kind of short-term things should sellers be doing there, whether it's for a wealth manager or not? What is the best way of looking at this scenario? versus because you're going to have the long-term investments, and then your short-term investments is where can I realistically make some money that goes towards paying living costs.
The income replacement thing. So the irony of that at the moment, with base rates and deposit rates being incredibly low, although they are starting to tick up, is that you actually can get better income from taking more risk by going after dividends from companies that typically and have been consistently over the last 12 years or so higher than you can get on deposit rates. So again, that will come down to talking to the client about how much risk they could take. But if they can take the risk, you can get some fairly decent levels of income to replace the income that you've lost, typically around 3 to 4% from some very consistent companies. I can't obviously name any of them, that will replace that income and keep churning out those dividends. So there are companies in the healthcare space in particular that are very consistent, and some very good sort of consumer companies that keep churning out income regularly, and it's a regular part of their return to their shareholders or their investors, and that would come back to you via a portfolio.
Gotcha. Question for you, so people can break it down and understand. Investment advisor, wealth manager, and relationship manager. Can we break these down and what the roles that they play?
Yeah. So Jim and I, we actually wear the wealth manager and relationship manager hat. So we talk directly to clients, and a key part of what we need to do is to understand what they want the money to do. And that you characterize as the relationship manager side of things. You're talking to the clients, you're engaging, you're reporting, you're getting to know them, getting to understand their needs. The actual wealth manager side as well is the actual implementation of that strategy which you devise with the client. So you are Jim and I are there at the coalface making the investments and reporting back to the clients as to why we're doing things, and helping them to understand what the opportunity set is out there in terms of what they might wish to do. And an investment advisor or a financial advisor, that tends to be more about structuring and specialist advice. Jim touched on it with pensions, maybe tax, and within the UK side of place, we have that available in-house, but it is a different and separate specialist expertise and a different set of qualifications actually in terms of what's going on with the financial advice side. Does that cover it off? Or?
It does, yeah. Jim, just to bring you in, what questions should a seller come and ask people like a wealth manager? Like there must be 10 key things. One, because they've still got to identify who's the best suit for them. So if you know nothing about it, right, let's pretend, okay, I've got some money now, but I've never invested in before. What questions should I be asking the wealth manager when, because you're going to meet 2 or 3 of them, what are the key questions and some red flags you should look out for that that you're picking a reputable company?
It's a very good question, Danny. I think it's key to feel that ultimately you can trust the person that sat across the table from you. And the person that you're sat across the table from, you need to be very clear as to whether they are actually the wealth manager or the relationship manager or somebody else. And as Richard explained, Richard and I are both wealth manager and relationship manager. Now, there are some firms where you'll meet some very credible people, but they may only be the relationship manager. So they may be the interface with you and their company, but it could be someone completely different that is pulling the trigger on your investments. And you need to be clear that you're actually comfortable with whatever that relationship may be. Also be very clear are you speaking to an investment advisor who's going to charge you a separate set of fees to the wealth manager who will also charge you fees? So just be clear on where you are in that whole structure. As I said, if you speak to Richard and I, we're the people that are going to be making the investments for you. We're the people that are going to be reporting to you. I think it's also very clear you do need to understand what the investment strategy is. So one of your life after exit people, I can't remember which one it was, indicated they were in crypto and property, and they had a manager or a wealth manager who was doing something in markets, but they didn't really know what it was. From our perspective, that would be a failure. If we had a client and they didn't understand, at least broadly speaking, what we're doing and why, I think we would feel that we had failed in our duty. It's really important to us that the client is comfortable with the investments that we're making and is comfortable with the reporting and the performance that we give them over a period of time. And just with regard to performance, again, be very clear that the performance numbers you're seeing are, should we say, accurate and audited. So, for example, our performance numbers are reported after fees. So the numbers you see are after the fees have been deducted. And we also show our performance numbers next to an externally verified benchmark. And so you really need to be clear that you're looking at genuine numbers, and that those numbers, how do they compare with, should we say, your peer group? What you do need to be very careful of is fees, and then there's a star, and actually all those fees are gross before fees, and there's no benchmark, or this is what your portfolio might have looked like, rather than this is the performance that our firm has been able to generate. So those are just some of the key items. I don't know if, Richard, you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you've pretty much hit all the main things there. And it's really, understanding what they're going to be investing in for you. Have they listened to you? Have they taken on board what you want? And are they giving you what you want as a client, as opposed to them telling you what you should do? So this is a very important part of the getting to know each other part of clients. We don't charge any fees for talking to prospective clients. We only charge after we've taken clients on and are starting to invest the money. So we have this long dialogue before we sign people up, because it's important that they know what we do, they're happy with what we do. And actually, there are some people we occasionally see who, that we don't do what they want to do, and we won't, take them on. We'll say, well, look, this isn't what we do, but you might want to talk to so and so. Thankfully, this doesn't happen, too frequently. But the main thing is, listen. You've got to feel as a client or a prospective client that you're being listened to, and you're understanding what you're going to get. Yeah.
Jim, you mentioned about wealth manager, relationship manager, and that you guys wear the same hats because you're trained in both. Is there other people in that scale there? So, like, you go to a wealth manager, but the relationship manager gets a fee, or if they are trained as both, is it summed as one fee? How would that work so that sellers would understand?
Richard, you might be better to respond to this one, but.
I'll touch on it. I mean, typically you'll get them in the same firm, and quite often it is all included within the fee. But what I found, and I'm sure Jim's found throughout his career as well, if you're not close to the coalface in terms of making, looking at the screens, making the investment decisions, being able to articulate why something was done, it's the second-hand information. So, Jim and I work closely with a better part of 100 colleagues every day, and we're looking at all our investment ideas around the world and sharing our intellectual property with each other and trying to make sure we're making the best decisions possible for clients. And we can always articulate why we've done something for clients. And that's an important thing. If you're dealing with a relationship manager, they're not going to be at that coalface every morning. And that's kind of a slight difference, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And so you don't have to answer this question, but I'll ask it, and respectfully you can say no. Obviously, a lot of people, as they're making money, they want to look at very well structured, tax efficient investments, right? Because they don't want to invest and pay all their investments out in taxes. What happens in those scenarios if you can ask that question? Because obviously some things, like from my understanding, pensions can be very tax efficient, but then so other instruments may not be. So are they conversations that you can have with clients, in confidentiality way, or is there something that people need to be aware of, is that, look, this is good, but it's probably not as tax efficient as X, Y, and Z?
So tax is definitely part of the conversation wherever anyone is. And
Yeah.
Tax you have to pay wherever you live. That's
of course. I was saying respectfully because
absolutely.
it's like sometimes you can't answer those questions because you don't want to get the wrong context to things.
So tax avoidance is entirely legitimate. So if people are making pension contributions or paying into an ISA, individual savings account, that's all tax avoidance, but it's HMRC.
Is it avoidance or efficiency? Because avoidance
it's both. It absolutely makes sense. So I mean, if you're a UK person, you have £20,000 that you can put into an individual savings account every year, and then that's shielded from tax. Now, if you're not doing that and you have the cash to do it, it's madness not to, because you get very few tax breaks from HMRC in the UK, and this is all legitimate, and these are things you should be doing. Likewise with pensions, and that's where the financial advice comes in, because you can pay money gross of tax, i.e. before income tax, into a pension pot and grow it. And the government does this because it wants to encourage people to save for the future, and that's a big part of the conversation. And then at the other end of the scale, there's inheritance tax in the UK, and people might want to plan around that, and it's entirely legitimate.
Yeah, from my understanding, I may be wrong, you can correct, is I think you're allowed up to about 60,000 tax-free if you pay in through like a pension for your business, from my understanding. It's there or thereabouts. That's where I'd be skiing off piste to such and. We don't have to go into that. That was me just. Putting it out there roughly.
There are some quite substantial tax breaks which absolutely are legitimate, and you should be getting advice on. And as I say, that's where our professional advice side would be able to assist, and as they're the ones who stay on top of all the. It's a slightly moving field, because HMRC are forever sort of tinkering at the margin with the benefits or the areas where you can avoid tax as such. But absolutely, it's a big part.
That's also a long-term investment. You don't go, I'll do 2 years on a pension. That's something you're looking at for 10, 20, 30 years.
Indeed, yeah. But absolutely makes sense as part of your your overall financial plan as an individual, and to not use them would be madness.
Yeah. And for those of your sellers, Danny, in the UK, if they haven't made pension contributions over the last 3 or 4 years, you do have the potential to do 4 years in one go. You can actually put a very substantial amount through. And I know
you do it retrospectively based on year end, yeah?
Yeah, I'm not going to go through the specifics here because, as Richard said, we're straying into advice. But potentially, if you haven't, and if your income's been high enough for the previous 4 years, you can do up to 4 times the amount in one lump, which if you were selling your business and were coming into a large lump of cash, then that may well be a very wise thing to do. And again, we're straying into slightly areas that I'm not expertise in.
We're not here to give advice because I know because of financial bodies and stuff.
But there might be, if you're structured as a company, there may be some tax efficiency in having some pension contributions paid through your company prior to sale. So these are all things that your listeners, if they were about to sell, should be taking the appropriate, professional advice from.
Yeah, cool. And actually, just to add to that as well, given that we look out to the international side as well, there are different tax regimes around the world. I mean, some places have no capital gains tax, but obviously you could only avail of that if you're living there when you sell as such. But that, as I say, is another subject which probably would go down another rabbit hole as such. But there are options if people wanted to do that. But the golden rule is you pay tax where you live.
Yeah. So let's talk about pre-deal preparation, because obviously most of this is life after exit. A lot of the guys have prepared, and I think some of the guys have brought up things in terms of taxes and stuff because of share deal versus asset deal. I know someone who's getting ready to sell their business, they're in another country, but it would have cost them over 56% in taxes by doing the selling versus, share versus asset. And so it wasn't really applicable at that time because of the nature of the business wants to be purchased. So this obviously not advice, but can we run through share versus asset deal? Is that okay of what they are?
Sure.
Yeah. Jim, do you want to take that on?
I'll touch on that, but again, we're sort of dancing around some.
It's not advice, but you're explaining the difference between the two for people to make up their own mind.
Well, I'm gonna flag here one of your previous guests on Life After Exit, Richard Turnbull, who I did reach out to some time ago. And if your listeners are in the UK and are thinking about how do they want to structure the deal, I highly recommend that they listen to that. But I think he made a very good point early on in that, which was, don't think about the exit multiple. Don't think about the gross number. What you really need to think about, wherever you're domiciled, wherever you're paying tax, wherever your business is what am I actually going to be left with in cash after this transaction, after tax, and after all fees? Because that's the number that's going to go in the bank. Doesn't matter what the headline number was. So, for example, you may be better taking a slightly lower headline number if that deal structure is more optimal in terms of tax. So you really need to think about that net number. And again, I'm not going to go into all the specifics here, but for example, in the UK, the difference between share and selling an asset can be the difference, or can be quite substantial differences in percentage points of tax paid. Because if you don't structure it correctly, you could end up paying corporation tax and then income tax, which on a combined basis is a lot more potentially than just paying capital gains tax if you were to sell the company. So again, I'm not trying to tell people which the right answer is for them, but
no, you're just laying out, if they looked it up in a dictionary, this is what it would sound like. Yeah,
absolutely. And they absolutely need to get a proper tax or accountant to analyze and to go through the different scenarios. And there are, I gather, some differences in due diligence and process and everything else, which they would also need to take into consideration.
What about, can we talk about offshore? Because we'll go back to that point that some people want to travel around, make things work for them. And obviously, people don't want to pay more tax than they necessarily have to by law. So some people might think of offshore, but there's downsides to that, I'm sure, like can't get back in the country for a period of time, maximum days, those kind of things. Is that something that you're not advising on, but that what it looks like at all?
Well,
we're still in the grey.
We're both aware as we're both based in Guernsey, which is not part of the UK. So there are various different options. I mean, it really comes down to, if you are wanting to move to another country, you've obviously got to be happy with the tax system in that country. And there are some very advantageous jurisdictions. The UAE stroke Dubai at the moment is doing very well because it's very low tax and it's attracting a lot of entrepreneurs out there. So the fundamental principle well, it's not even a principle. I would say don't do things solely for tax, but if you can do it for lifestyle and a reason why you want to live somewhere, then that makes sense. There are, I'm very happy living where I'm at. I find it a very, very pleasant place to work and it's a very different and easy lifestyle over here, but it's not for everyone. And I think if people allow tax to drive their motivation, you can make wrong decisions, should we say?
Of course, it's the same as chasing a job or chasing a project because it's a lot of money. But the downside quite often is you don't enjoy it. So you get the money, but you hate your life.
Exactly. But if you are thinking of making the change, then it is undoubtedly worth thinking about doing for positive lifestyle reasons.
Yeah.
But I think if it's solely tax that is driving it, you could end up being sort of a very unhappy, poor person in a sunny jurisdiction, should we say? But no, there are advantages, many advantages. Some of the jurisdictions are very good for young families, if that's your type of thing. But it will involve a lot of change as such. You will be limited on how many days you can spend back in your original country. And also, if you're a US passport holder, it's a very different proposition. You pay tax on your worldwide income, which is, again, that's, with US clients, it's very hard to change that unless you're willing to change your passport, which is I wouldn't advocate unless it was an extremist as such, and they really decided they didn't want to maintain it. So there's many different aspects to it.
Yeah,
I think, Danny, the key point though for anyone who's looking to sell is you must have all these thoughts and conversations with your family and your tax and your various advisors prior to agreeing your deal. Because what you won't be able to do is agree the deal and then, oh yeah, it would be nice to go backwards in time, but you can't. So think about all these things and have discussions prior to that finalization of the deal. It's really important.
Yeah, sounds good. Is there anything we've not covered, guys, before we finish up?
Ooh, just trying to think.
Do you know what one? We haven't covered what's going on in the world at the moment, and the implications from WAR that's taking place between two countries at this present time. Is
I think that's a very good point. I mean, so we are talking a lot with our clients about the implications of this really unpleasant war, and it's catalyzing a lot of change in markets and investments. So we had hopes that we were at the beginning of the year having conversations about the optimism about science, technology, and innovation. We dealt with COVID, we've knocked a global pandemic on the head, and that's all about technology and the innovation, gene sequencing, all these really exciting things we can invest in for clients. And then suddenly we've got war, and now that's changed the narrative to energy security, to dealing with inflation, to efficiency, to productivity. So it changes the nature of where we're trying to find opportunities for clients, but we're always looking at the world. And the one thing that we've always got from an investment perspective, and it's one of the things that I find fascinating, I'm sure Jim does as well, is that what we do, what we look at every day, it changes. So the opportunity set changes. And, dare I say it, the war that we're seeing, it is catalyzing some things that needed to happen anyway about energy security. The actual policy in the West has been an absolute mess for where we source our energy and how we're going to keep the lights on. In particular, it's being fundamentally looked at the moment, and it needed to be 10 years ago. But anyway, we are where we are, and so it will catalyze some positive things out of this, in terms of us being forced to change.
Yeah, no, it's interesting times.
And I think, Danny, that, obviously rising inflation is a global phenomenon, which has, kicked off with the pandemic and the supply disruptions, which I'm sure all of your listeners will know a lot about because they're dealing with that every day. Metals, crate costs, the whole shebang. But of course, if for any reason anyone has been fortunate enough to sell and is sat on a big lump of cash, well, that's a nice place to be. But with inflation running at 7-8%, if you get that for a few years and you've just stuck it in the bank, that's not a great place to be, which is why a lot of the people we're speaking to are thinking, well, how do I offset some of these impacts of inflation? And we believe we can help our clients by investing wisely into different asset classes.
Excellent. Cool. So what's the best way to reach you guys?
So I either email richard.hollowood@Close Brothers, or you'll find me on LinkedIn, Richard Hollowood, and for you, Jim.
Yeah, exactly the same. LinkedIn, Jim Mann, or jim.mann@closebrothers.com.
Excellent. Guys, thank you for joining us today. For those that are listening, I'll be back here tomorrow. Take care of yourself and your family. Much love, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Cheers, Danny.
Thanks very much, Danny.